Welcome to episode number 14 of the LSR podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all of the gaming industry. We have two of those minds with us this week in Adam Candy and Eric Ramsey. We are sans Dustin Gowker. And Eric, before we got going here, you and Adam were talking about how you were just over the moon that we were sans Dustin Gowker this week.
We are already, doesn't it just seem like a good Friday? Isn't everyone in a good mood? We had a nice little chat before we recorded. The sun's shining, the birds are chirping.
Adam's very awake, he said. Adam's very awake. Everything is going good for this episode number 14 of this podcast. No, Adam, you're very awake and no Dustin. What else could go right about this podcast? This seems like we're already peaked.
Well, we're a little heavy on the Ramsey here, but other than that, we'll get by.
We are, guys. We are on Apple Podcasts. We are on Stitcher. We're on Spotify. We're on Google Podcasts as well. So basically everywhere that you get your podcasts, we are located there. So please subscribe, rate, review. You will live happily ever after. I promise you this. You can follow us on the Twitter machine at LSP Report, at Adam Candy, no Y2Es, and at Eric_Ramsey. And you can... With those, the combination of that is just all you need to keep up with everything that is going on in this wild and crazy gambling industry that we are living through right now. We will talk Louisiana, New Hampshire, New York, a little bit of 888, talk some Google stuff, and then we will talk the awesome New Jersey numbers and the Wire Act. But Eric, let's kick things off here with some terrible, terrible, terrible news coming out of my home state. Louisiana just Louisiana'd things up.
Yeah, buddy, I'm so sorry to do this to you. We thought we were going to get DFS this year from the referendum last November, and then it looked like sports betting was really a big favorite to pass, had an easy path through the Senate, and looked like no real hurdles to passage. You guys are not going to have any of that stuff this year. The House committee killed that standalone sports betting bill. You guys talked about that last week. And the sponsor essentially, I don't want to say wrecked the fantasy sports bills by trying to get sports betting in there, but at least kind of derailed their path to passage. Right before adjournment, the last DFS tax bill ran out of time. The sponsor was on the floor sort of making his point that he would have preferred to have sports betting, whether or not it was a filibuster or just a case of good timing is sort of in the eye of the viewer, but essentially time ran out without legalizing the fantasy sports tax mechanism. So you are not going to be able to bet on sports in Louisiana this year, and very likely won't be able to play fantasy sports until we get these laws onto the books. Bad news in Louisiana.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I actually saw an interview with those guys coming out of one of the news stations there in Louisiana, and he actually full on said, yes, I did hijack the fantasy sports bill. They said the guy asking the question said, it's been said a little bit that you kind of hijacked the fantasy sports bill because you were really trying to get yours done, even though, the fantasy sports bill looked like it had, really a clear path to getting done or whatever. And he goes, yeah, I did. I hijacked it. Like he made no qualms about it. He was just like, yeah, no, I did. I hijacked it. So yeah, he was kind of proud of it, actually.
Yeah, fair enough. And, I would kudos to Senator Danny Martini, who was the sponsor of this. He seemed to be one of the good guys who seemed to understand the right reasons to do this, pushed back against things like official league data and broader prohibitions in this bill. He is terming out of office this year. That filibuster was his last few minutes on the floor. So we're not going to have him in place when we reconsider this bill. That's a little bit of a bummer. But it was amusing how that all played out down the last few minutes of session. This was all not coming together. So interesting couple hours.
Adam, I can only imagine if you are one of the sportsbook operators in Mississippi, you are probably jumping up and down and pretty happy about this because you're going to keep your monopoly there in the deep South and not have to worry about Louisiana. Again, the proximity of New Orleans to, a Biloxi is pretty close. And so, getting those people to drive over and continue to bet sports over there at your Borgata or your any of these, at your Beau Rivage or any of these other properties that are going on over there. I bet this is kind of a win for Mississippi here.
I would say it's a win in the short term for Mississippi. For as long as Mississippi continues to be on property only with retail and what we've come to call Mississippi Mobile, where you can have a mobile app on property. We've only seen one casino take advantage of that thus far. I think it is a temporary thing for Mississippi to keep its advantage for another year or so, depending on what happens throughout the rest of the region. Not that Arkansas is next door, but we're expecting Arkansas to fire up here before too long. And so anyway, I think Mississippi gets a reprieve, if not a long-term advantage.
Probably also a small short-term victory for the Louisiana casinos, even though they're not going to have sports betting. It means that FanDuel and DraftKings will not be offering fantasy sports in the market this year and sort of building up that customer database. So they supported sports betting in Louisiana, but probably not too upset that FanDuel and DraftKings won't be around.
Yeah, and I would imagine they're feeling pretty good as well whenever as you mentioned on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, that one of the reasons why this thing got derailed was they were trying to add over 2,000 locations that sports betting was going to be offered. So I imagine they're pretty happy that that is not the case as well.
Correct. The bill just wasn't built for that. It would have been a big burden on state police and things like that. And I think, as you mentioned, not the strictest gambling regulations and enforcement in those sorts of establishments.
Now, Adam, we are talking about bad news coming out of Louisiana, but if you are one of the handful of people that lives in New Hampshire, we got some good news for you.
I guess our axiom of the smaller the state, the better the chance of passing positive sports betting legislation holds up one more time, as the Granite State looks like it's about to legalize sports betting. The bill has passed both chambers of the House on the way to the governor. You will have mobile sports betting in New Hampshire with remote registration, so you have easy access to be able to bet if you're one of the as Matt wants you to believe, dozens of people who live in the state of New Hampshire. I also am pretty encouraged overall by the look of the bill. It will be a revenue share model similar to what goes on in Rhode Island and in Delaware. The details of that have not been finalized yet. That'll probably go out to bid, and that could get interesting because you could see a situation like you had in Washington, D.C., where you have a single operator, and the claims that Intralot went out there and made in D.C. as to just how good of a deal they could provide the district, which is dubious at best. So the good thing, New Hampshire becomes another state coming into the sports betting realm. The to be seen is exactly how the details of it will look.
If you were wondering about the actual number here, 1.35 million people in the great state of New Hampshire, which actually ranks 41st. Eric, would you have guessed that New Hampshire had more people than Maine?
Yes, I would have guessed that. They all follow you on Twitter. I'm pretty sure everyone in New Hampshire follows you on Twitter too, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, obviously more people than Maine, Montana, Rhode Island, Delaware, South Dakota, North Dakota, Alaska, Vermont, and Wyoming. So, I mean, if you are in New Hampshire, you're above 10 states there, Adam.
You are, and I was sort of mocking you for coming down on the people of New Hampshire. The part that you didn't mention is that more than 1 million of those people are actually in the state legislature. It's amazing. They all get to stand up and be part of a voice vote for everything that happens. It truly is democracy in action. The bill, just to tie up a couple of details, there will be as many as 5 mobile operators. There can be up to 10 retail locations. And there will be a ban on in-state betting, not only in terms of bans on anything involving New Hampshire teams, but any event that happens to be in New Hampshire involving collegiate teams or obviously amateur events. The legal sports betting age in New Hampshire will be 18 as opposed to 21 some other places. So living up to that live free or die motto.
And looking here at New Hampshire, as I look at my handy dandy Google map right here, I think one of the other things I guess we can point out with there being mobile allowed there, they are on the border of Massachusetts and Maine. And so, I mean, you are going to get those people who do want to make a drive and cross across the border there and place a bet on, some of the bigger sporting events, I would imagine. I mean, I can't imagine there's going to be tons of people doing this for the, smaller stuff. But I mean, we've seen it time and time again over in New Jersey. I mean, what was the exact figure there, guys? What did they estimate the number of the percent of handle from New York in New Jersey actually is?
Well, it's not actually so much the percent of handles as much as it is that FanDuel was saying that 25% of its accounts in New Jersey have a registered New York address. So you can kind of extrapolate from there and figure out just how much of the handle is coming from over the border. And when you talk about New Hampshire, you factor in that Rhode Island also legalized mobile sports betting this year after having launched as retail only last year. So you have a casino in Twin River just about an hour's drive away from the Boston area that will allow folks from Massachusetts to have a number of options.
It is exciting times for sure for the people of New Hampshire. And if you're living in Boston, like Adam just mentioned, a couple of different options for you there as well. Now, Eric, every single week we have to talk about New York. It is impossible for us to escape this state. And we always have some new comings and goings in this crazy legislation up there. What is going on in New York? Can we give anybody listening to this podcast some sort of clarity?
No.
We cannot. We cannot. Short answer. No, we cannot actually.
We always have a great deal happening there and really not much in the way of progress or any real change in the overall landscape. We have a new version of the Senate bill we're watching, Senate Bill 17. There's now a C version of that bill, the third amendment. This is basically a little cleanup to add in the rest of the pro stadiums that were excluded by the B version. So it would allow sports betting via the commercial casinos that are already authorized, as well as racetracks, OTBs, and sports venues in the state. It is not clear to me that the leagues will permit this sort of thing or want this. Also not clear to me that the casinos will support this, having to deal with more competition. We also hear the assembly is not going to do sports betting this year, is the latest we hear on the ground. The governor's not really on board. There's nothing really to be optimistic about except for the fact that these bills are moving in the last few days of session, adjournment scheduled for next Wednesday, and we still have to get through a couple committee hearings and votes. I think it is less likely now even than the B version, but we will find out within the next week for sure, probably, maybe, whether or not New York is going to have mobile betting this year.
So we will at least by the time, let's call it 2 podcasts from now, have some sort of clarity for the great people of New York as to how they are going to be able to bet.
One would certainly hope. And remember as well, the retail rules for sports betting at the 4 upstate casinos and the tribal casinos will also be allowed. Those were approved this week. So we are starting to move towards the launch of brick and mortar sports betting in an actual tangible way, but nobody's terribly excited about that because these casinos are all in the middle of nowhere, essentially.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's go ahead and, in case somebody's tuning in for the first time here, it doesn't have the complete background of New York. The casinos that are available to present sports betting coming up, they are not in populous areas.
Correct. There are 4 of them in the upstate region. The closest one to population centers is Resorts World Catskills, which is about 90 miles north of the city. So basically, if you're living in New York City and you want to place a sports bet, you have the option of driving 4 minutes across the border to New Jersey and using your cell phone, or driving 90 miles north to Resorts World to go walk into a casino and get your money down. They're not convenient to the population centers. I'm here in Syracuse in the middle of the state. I have 2 casinos, both about a half hour away from me on either side, one tribal, one commercial. I'm disinclined to even make that little half-hour trip, to be honest. I'll do it from time to time, but even a little half-hour drive is a hurdle bigger than many bettors are willing to jump over.
Now, Adam, I don't know about you, but if I had to make a 5-minute drive or a 90-minute drive to make a bet, I think more times than not, I'm going to opt for the 5-minute drive. And if you are in the state of New York, you would then be placing that bet in New Jersey, which means that money is in New Jersey and not in your home state. Why is this so hard for people to understand why they need mobile sports betting?
Maybe not so hard to understand as to convince the skeptics and fearmongers out there that it is not going to be the death of modern civilization as we know it. You think about it in terms of Nevada. If you were figuring this out for yourself, Matt, would you want to drive to Red Rock casino, or would you want to head out to Pahrump? Those really would be your options.
Right, exactly. I mean, this just, I don't know. And this is kind of going back to when we were talking about Louisiana and the Mississippi thing. Mississippi, a very small victory that Louisiana is not going to get sports betting. They will get some of that money from Louisiana from people driving over. I mean, if you're New Jersey, you're probably fairly happy if New York does not pass any sort of mobile thing. I mean, as we just touched on, you said 25% of the accounts have New York residencies, have New York addresses. So, I mean, if you're New Jersey, you're probably kind of rooting for nothing to happen here.
Oh, you are more than a little bit happy. You are extremely happy if you're in New Jersey, because remember that you also just had Pennsylvania begin its online market, again, in a very small way with Sugar House and its Android and desktop site. But you know that more is coming in Pennsylvania, so you're going to potentially lose some market share there. And New York is the heavy. I mean, that's what everyone is waiting on. If New York comes into the market, then both New Jersey and Pennsylvania stand to lose significantly, not just in terms of, adding a new market, but the cannibalization that could go on there. Of course, you're going to add a lot more people, but those New York City folks who are right near the New Jersey border, that market becomes a battleground for New York, New Jersey, and maybe even Pennsylvania as well.
Yeah, definitely something we will talk about here in just a little bit as we talk about the New Jersey numbers as well. Now, Adam, some information came out from the people at 888. If you guys are unfamiliar with 888, very big gaming company based overseas. They run poker sites. Of course, they run sports betting sites as well, and has a skin over there in New Jersey. But some information saying that maybe this whole in-game thing isn't taking as we thought.
What I found interesting about this is the disparity between in-play betting in the U.S. and in-play betting overseas. Overall, the amount of mobile wagering fairly close in what 888 is seeing in New Jersey and what it sees overseas, about 4 out of 5 bets. That's about the market standard of what we've seen in New Jersey. But in terms of in-play, globally, 63% of 888's bets come in play, only 50% in the U.S., and that is where 888, which has not made a huge dent in New Jersey to this point, sees the growth opportunity. Obviously, other operators do as well, but for 888, they're looking at it and saying, we think that within a few years that in-play is really going to blow up in the United States, and that could potentially be a place where some of the lesser known and I don't want to say less successful, but less established operators in the New Jersey market, at least up until this point, might have a chance to make some inroads.
Eric, if I am one of these operators here, I am really, really going after figuring out how to offer some interesting baseball and golf in play, because whenever we look at it, and I know Adam had some frustrations here in Nevada last night as he was watching Game 6 of the NBA Finals. Basketball is very fast paced, kind of hard to get in game. Football moves fairly rapidly, kind of hard to get in game. It doesn't surprise me that there's so much handle and so much betting going on overseas, because of course their most popular sport being soccer, not a lot of scoring, a lot of kind of downtime between, major events. So there's lots of ways to get down during the course of a soccer game. With our sports that we find very popular over here, they're fairly rapidly moving. You're having to try to figure these odds out. And by the time you actually get in there to make a bet, then the odds have changed because something else has happened in the game. But with baseball, a little bit slower moving. Golf, obviously much slower moving. I would really, really take a push on trying to offer golf and baseball in-game stuff and say like, hey man, these sports were built for in-game.
Yeah, we've been talking about this since we started talking about legal in-game betting in the U.S. and the way the industry is going in general. We're even to the extent of things like biometric data, but even stopping short of that, the amount of in-play markets that are available are far more than there have ever been. Baseball gravitating toward sort of a pitch-by-pitch in play rather than inning-by-inning. Golf, obviously, perfectly suited for this. Does seem like there is some room for this in the U.S. market if someone can really find a way to nail those two in-play games.
Adam, one of the other things I want to point out here is we talk about a lot of this official league data and mandates and whatever. I mean, this doesn't really have anything to do with data for us over here. I mean, it's just the pace of play in basketball, the pace of play in football, obviously the two most popular sports in the United States right now. It's just, it doesn't matter where you're getting your data from. It's just the information is changing so rapidly. The odds are changing so rapidly. Things are happening so rapidly. It's hard to get down just in general, and getting official league data isn't going to help that at all, no matter how much they try and tell you that it will.
I talked to the folks at Sport Radar a little bit about this because they're the ones who've been selling the official data on behalf of the leagues. And ultimately, they offer both products. They offer official, they offer unofficial. And they talk about the fact that, world-class feed is going to be updating within 3 to 4 seconds of action, that the ones that are a little bit slower are going to be more like 6 to 7 seconds. Can you operate a platform on 6 to 7 seconds? Absolutely. You mentioned the speed of certain games. Yes, it becomes a lot more challenging in basketball, potentially in hockey. That's not really going to affect baseball or football quite the same way. You have enough lag between the plays that you'll have a chance for that data feed to update, for it to feed into the algorithms, for things to essentially update the way that they need to. Because remember, we're not talking about a room of traders sitting around and updating in-play odds as we go. That can happen. That does happen in some cases. But most of this is happening algorithmically via computer. It's going very, very fast, and we're talking about a matter of just a couple of seconds.
It is going to be very, very interesting. I mean, I can't disagree with 888. I mean, I certainly think that there is much, much room for improvement here. I would just go the route of making it a much more pleasurable experience for the better, and that's why I would be pushing some of these other sports. But I am just sitting here hosting a podcast, and those guys are running these sports books, so they will do what they will. Eric, one of the interesting things that we have dealt with basically since the beginning of working in this industry, I mean, you and I have been around a very long time when it comes to working in the gambling industry one way, shape, or form, be it in poker, DFS, sports betting, whatever it is just the fact that with kind of some of the views by the major companies out there as to how they're going to deal with gambling and gaming and advertising and all the different things like that, it's sometimes tough to market your product, sometimes tough to find airtime. I mean, of course, there for a while, every single ad on ESPN was the poker sites, and then that went away instantly, and we haven't really seen any of that anymore. Of course, we're not seeing very many sports betting ads. You can see them locally here in Nevada. They run locally, but of course, you're not going to see stuff nationally anytime soon. Well, Google is at least poking around just a little bit with trying to understand that there is legal markets now, and since it is legal in said market, that they should be able to serve said market.
He also read, since there's revenue to be made in said market, they should serve said market. Yes, this is almost certainly, just a realization of the financial potential of sports betting. If you're familiar with the Google Ads platform, formerly AdWords, it is the largest digital advertising platform in the world. You'll see the embedded Google Ads on a number of websites that you visit every day. A new beta update in New Jersey is allowing, for the first time ever, New Jersey sportsbooks to advertise via the Google Ads platform. Previously, their gambling ads were limited to state lotteries, did not allow any other forms of gambling. So now we have sportsbooks in New Jersey must be licensed by the DGE to advertise. And so far, no online poker or online casino. No states beyond New Jersey, but we'd have to probably infer that this is sort of the first step, and this will almost certainly be expanding to more states and more verticals soon. Meanwhile, YouTube, which is also owned by Google, has sort of been cracking down on video links to online poker sites. So a little bit of a mixed message from Google there, but incredibly good news for regulated operators in New Jersey.
Yeah, I think that they're trying to kind of figure this out along the way. And what's going on with that is you're kind of getting, like you mentioned, some mixed messages. I mean, yeah, Google is a gigantic company. So there is someone who is running Google Ads over there, and then there's someone who's running YouTube and YouTube ads and YouTube policy and all the different things like that, even though it is under the same umbrella. certainly, definitely, different policies going on there. One of the interesting things I saw as well in this is they also, where iLottery is available, if you have an iLottery situation, you can also do iLottery. So that was one of the other ads that they have in this whole beta rollout as well. I mean, Adam, as we look at this, I think this is probably just the beginning of Google and probably Facebook and probably any of these major platforms where people are able to reach the masses to advertise their products. It's just the beginning of a little bit of a shakedown. And at the end of the day, I don't really have a huge problem with it. I mean, look, you are using their means to get to a potential customer and a potential client or whatever it might be. So them getting a cut of something is fine by me. I just think that the way that they're going about it, by going in and just dropping the band hammer on everything and saying like, okay, we're just going to cut everything off while we figure out what we're going to do. I think there's probably a better way to go about it. Just say like, hey guys, like we're trying to figure things out. So just know there might be some changes in the future. Regardless, I think this is just a precursor to Google, Facebook, et cetera, coming out with a full-on gambling policy where you're going to have to pay the piper.
There's going to be a bargain to be made however the industry expands. And we need to accept that as this becomes a mainstream market, everyone will find a way to get their cut. Now, how that happens, there can be plenty of healthy debate about how we go about it. When we're talking about leagues getting involved, bringing in the casual bettor, making this a much wider pool of people to draw from, which is a good thing for a low margin business that needs high volume, then it is ultimately a good thing when we are going to expand access, we're going to expand visibility. Google, being the primary way that people access information in this world today, knows its position and knows the fact that it has a giant hammer to wield. So is it the most egalitarian way for Google to go about starting this program? No, it's not. It's not exactly in the spirit of net neutrality, and those sorts of initiatives. At the same time, if ultimately in the long run this leads to more access to the legal regulated industry, then it's kind of hard to argue.
Yeah, and Eric, as you mentioned, I mean, this is one of those things where you have to go in and you have to apply and they have to approve you. And I think these are all steps in the right direction, right? I mean, we certainly want Google cracking down on the offshore market or these, any of these kind of underhanded practices that are going on to acquire, the unknowing customer, because that's the other thing that we've talked about on this podcast several times. I mean, you Google sports betting and the first 5 things that pop up are all offshore books. And for the person who doesn't know any better, it's certainly confusing. It's certainly something that they don't really understand. So, I mean, if Google has decided, okay, look, this is inevitable, this is happening, this is going to expand, this is going to be a part of our lives, we need to get a hold of this. I do think it is a good thing in the long run. Just in the short run, it's kind of annoying.
Yeah, I do. I think it's a good thing too. And it may sound strange, but I'll tell you, there are people in New Jersey who do not know that they can legally gamble online. There is a lack of knowledge. It extends to things like payment processors too, who still are trying to grasp the legality of this. So for Google to take this step may sort of help normalize the understanding that this is legal and well regulated. These advertisers via their license have to maintain strict advertising policies, not advertising to minors and things like that. So yeah, I think this is being well handled from what I can see.
Now, Adam, from time to time, there are articles that get written in some of the mainstream media, in particular, this one being the Philadelphia Inquirer, about this gambling world that we live in so, day in and day out, and that you guys live and breathe and certainly know all the nooks and crannies. There was an op-ed piece that ran in the Philadelphia Inquirer here talking about how people should deal with all of this. But why don't you fill people in and kind of give your opinion on the op-ed?
Yes, my opinion is that this opinion is a bad opinion from an opinion page that should have been much clearer about where the opinion is coming from. You have an op-ed in the Philadelphia Inquirer from former Pennsylvania Governor and Bush Homeland Security Secretary Tom Ridge and Tom McMillan, who runs a lobbying group for athletic directors at the NCAA level. And look, I think we can all agree on the need to safeguard integrity within legal sports betting, especially at the collegiate level. But this op-ed, which is not very well identified, goes about it all the wrong way. And I want to start with that because I think that understanding where the messages are coming from today is really important. Tom Ridge is identified in this article as the 43rd governor of Pennsylvania and the first U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security. And then it throws in one line, he is an advisor to Daon. I apologize if I'm saying that incorrectly, DAON, a global biometrics company. Okay, this op-ed advocates for the use of biometrics in identifying sports bettors in concert with geolocation. If you're going to go out there and let someone who represents a biometrics company get a free pitch for using their technology in order to make profit, you need to be a lot clearer about what's going on, because that's essentially what's happening in this op-ed. So he's not just an advisor. Tom Ridge is not just an advisor to this company. He is on the board of directors. So there's a question about profit motive when it comes to that as well. Tom McMillan has been very consistent in terms of his message on behalf of college athletic directors. So that's not terribly surprising. But there is a lot of fear-mongering and sort of baseless accusation that gets thrown out there. Let me give you an example from this piece. Here's a line. However, no one knows who's using that phone, as in the phone used to place a wager. It could be a 12-year-old child or a problem gambler who's self-excluded to one gaming operator but is relapsing on another. Guys, to me, this sounds like Donald Trump getting up and saying, we don't know it was Russia who hacked the DNC. It could have been a 400-pound guy in his bed. You just can't go out there and throw these things into the mix without some sort of substantiation. There's questions that come up in terms of the privacy of biometric data, about how the data ultimately is used. There are so many questions involved here that make this a terrible op-ed, a terrible use of a platform for fear-mongering, and shame on the Philadelphia Inquirer for not being much, much clearer about who the people behind this information are. Because when you have a byline that just says Tom Ridge and Tom McMillan for the Inquirer, is the average person going to do the amount of research that I did to go deep into the weeds and figure out why Tom Ridge is affiliated with this company the way that he is, to have had the background talking to Tom McMillan and understand what his advocacy standpoint is? No, they're not. And I don't think this is a good use of the platform by the Inquirer. And I think it's a irresponsible use of the platform by Tom Ridge, especially.
I mean, everybody wants to take their argument and crank it up to level 11 whenever they try to put out these crazy, theories and stuff. I mean, yeah. You're right there. I mean, yeah, maybe the guy is self-excluded at one place or whatever, but I mean, this is exact same situation that could happen in a physical sports book. I mean, the guy could walk into Hard Rock and place a bet or walk down the street and place a bet at Tropicana or whatever it might be. I mean, these things are, in worst case scenarios, yes, worst case scenarios always exist. And yes, worst case scenarios have sometimes bad consequences and stuff. But I mean, if we're talking about risk to people's selves and online and what they could do, I mean, this could go over to the people who are, quote unquote, he's talking about problem gambling here, quote unquote, problem shoppers. I mean, like maybe you Amazon account is the same with your online Walmart account. And like, you're blowing your money online. I just can't get behind all of these things that want to continually always paint the absolute worst possible scenario and say, this is why we need to do this giant sweeping change, because this one very isolated worst case scenario could possibly happen. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
I could not agree with you any more from a legislative standpoint or from a regulatory standpoint, whatever it is that we're talking about. And to also say that we need to go to biometric, that's turning it up to 11. That is not giving any respect to the KYC checks, the know your customer checks that are already part of registering for an account. I mean, when you go through and register for an account in New Jersey, you are providing some deeply identifying information about yourself, usually up to and including social security number, to make sure that you are who you are when you register the account. Now, in terms of the personal responsibility angle of who's using the phone, please don't do this, because you really could do this, as you said, Matt, for in person. You could certainly argue it. And when we talk about what's available on your phone, we have to talk about the personal responsibility of the person involved in the first place.
Exactly. If you're not protecting your phone from your 12-year-old, some of the responsibility falls on you.
No question about it. I agree with you wholeheartedly, and it's not a reason to take a worst-case scenario and to legislate or regulate based upon that.
If you guys want, again, more hot takes from Mr. Adam Candy, at Adam Candy, no Y2Es, on the Twitter machine. Now, Eric, we're getting going here with these numbers coming out of New Jersey. Every single time they come out, we always form opinions. Every single time they come out, everyone has hot takes. Let's get the hot takes on the New Jersey numbers here.
The hot take for May is that for the first time ever, New Jersey may have taken more bets than Nevada. We still don't have Nevada numbers, but in New Jersey, 318.9 million in handle is larger than the May 2018 handle in Nevada. So if we want to use that for reference, that was an all-time record in Nevada. So anything short of that would mean New Jersey takes the crown. About 15.5 million in revenue. So the hold took a little dent this past month, and yeah, just more of the same. We see FanDuel sort of dominating the market still, more than half of the total revenue, and 88% of all revenue came from mobile. 81% of handle, 88% of revenue on online and mobile devices. So a lot more of the same with a potential threat to Nevada's crown in there too.
Now, Adam, you dug into this a lot. You have an article over on LegalSportsReport.com. Did anything stick out to you as you were kind of digging through these numbers?
What jumps out to me is that this is becoming what looks like a pretty average month for New Jersey, right? We're pretty close to historical hold in Nevada. We're just a little bit under. The revenue seems to have settled down to an amount that seems sustainable, especially when we talk about a time on the sports calendar in May when there's really not anything in terms of major events going on. Yes, you have the NBA and NHL playoffs, but of course you have no football on the calendar during those months. So this seems like a sustainable number. And I think that's where the question really comes in for Nevada. We see that Nevada can have a huge month like it did for March Madness and approach $600 million, a record month for any month in its history in handle. Event-driven things in Nevada will still continue to be able to bring big revenue to the state. But New Jersey, with its growth in mobile, and anecdotally at least, we know that New Jersey is probably 10 to 20% on average in terms of handle coming from mobile, maybe even more than that in terms of revenue. We see that the sustainability of mobile in New Jersey could be the thing that ends up allowing it to pass Nevada on a consistent basis. Yes, Nevada is still going to have big months. When you have the Super Bowl, when you have March Madness, when you have these major things that people are going to come to Las Vegas for because you can't replicate the Las Vegas experience anywhere else, then you will see Nevada continue to be at the top. But you and I have had this discussion in person. We've had this discussion on the podcast. A month like this, an unspectacular month like this that still looks pretty good for New Jersey, to me is the clarion call to the books in Nevada to upgrade and enhance their mobile technology to be able to keep pace with not only what's going to be going on in New Jersey, but what's already starting in Pennsylvania and what could be coming to New York and other large states in short order.
Eric, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but just to drive it home here, now we are certainly very encouraged by these numbers coming out of New Jersey. We certainly, I don't think I saw it getting as big as fast as it has, and it's just really blows me away every single time that we get this. But some of the other numbers that come out of New Jersey, I mean, are fairly interesting as well. I mean, the casino and poker side, I know the casino side numbers just eye-popping, and then the poker side, not so much.
Yeah, casinos have just been on this absurd run throughout pretty much over the last year, sort of coinciding with the launch of sports betting, curiously enough. Another, almost 39 million in revenue for online gambling sites in May. A very small fraction of that comes from poker. It's almost all casino games. So yeah, when you add in the online sports betting traffic, more than 54 million in total online gaming revenue for New Jersey. Just talking about huge numbers that, in addition to the direct tax benefit from the state, are also bolstering direct casino revenue and crossover traffic and foot traffic and things like that. It is just providing the gold standard in what an online gambling industry can look like.
And Adam, just to drive home here I know that we have, again, dozens and dozens of lawmakers that listen to this podcast as well. What we've seen with that, and as the numbers continue to grow from the casino side and the sports betting side, is now we don't have all of the information, but we're smart enough and have dug in enough and have sources and are able to kind of deduce from this that when you have both, when you have casino and you have sports betting, sports bettors cross over to casino, casino cross over to sports betting, and it's actually really, really good. Who'da thunk it? It's actually really, really good for both industries.
The opportunity, especially when we talk about New Jersey, when it comes to casino cross-sell, is a large part of the reason to have sports betting. We are going to see some questions pop up when it comes to the regulations in the App Store. I mean, we're already seeing these questions pop up about what's going to happen a couple of months from now when the App Store cracks down on online gambling and its tie up in the same app with sports betting. Ultimately, that opportunity is huge, but there are a lot of questions out there about whether or not it could be stifled in the near future.
And to close things out here, Eric, you can find this entire story over on Online Poker Report. So we have a sister site there, Online Poker Report, OPR Report there. Let's talk a little bit about this whole Wire Act thing. And this was something that you were able to kind of get the heads up on. I think you were the first person to kind of break this story here. But let's talk a little bit about the Wire Act and where and when and how and if it will be enforced.
Yeah, so we'll do the quick backstory thing again. 1961 federal law called the Wire Act applies to interstate online sports betting. In 2018, the Department of Justice expanded its interpretation to broadly cover online gambling, which sparked a number of legal challenges. The one we're watching in New Hampshire is resolved in favor of the New Hampshire lottery. The DOJ lost this case. The DOJ initially had June 14th, which coincidentally is today, as it's the start of when it would enforce its new opinion. Until this week, we weren't exactly sure what was going to happen on this maybe Black Friday, this Gray Friday. But on Wednesday, actually, DOJ issued another memo extending the compliance period through the end of the year or until 60 days after a final judgment in New Hampshire. So no enforcement coming against things like online lottery and online casinos and poker sites in the short term. I read this to mean that an appeal is a near certainty, but at least the immediate threat of problems from the federal government has subsided.
One of the things we talked about on here is how this might affect, of course, there's an interstate pact between New Jersey and Nevada when it comes to online poker. And the reason we bring that up is because this is World Series of Poker time right now on WSOP.com. They are offering online poker bracelet events, so you can actually win a World Series of Poker bracelet by playing online. We knew that the first couple of events were going to be open to New Jersey residents. Have we gotten any clarification as to the rest of the entire series?
Yeah, the remaining 7 will be as well. There's one every weekend from now through the end of the series. And although poker may be a small market, this is maybe as critical to poker as anything. Poker requires these multi-state compacts in order to function as a legitimate industry. So if we can't have interstate player pooling, we're not going to see a resurgence in U.S. online poker.
Yeah, it is a liquidity-driven entity no matter what. I mean, like we've seen this even when there was gray market sites that were able to kind of operate here in the United States. Was the reason that the party pokers and full tilts and poker stars of the world just rose above everybody else is just they had more players, and with more players you can guarantee more prize pools, and with more prize pools you can attract more people, aka the casual people, because they think they can turn their $3 or their $5 or their $10 or even their $200 if you're talking about the Sunday Million over on PokerStars into hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not a 7-figure payout. And what we've seen, I live here in Nevada, I mess around every now and then at WSOP.com when there is no, series going on or kind of anything like that. The liquidity is so low and the prize pools are so low. it just doesn't really move the meter. So like you mentioned, I mean, if we can't get another 2, 3, 4, or 5 states kind of in on all of this, I don't think we're going to see any tick up in the online poker side.
Provided this ruling holds in the long term and is not overturned by a court above this is some immediate good news with Pennsylvania coming online later this year. You know, it is going to be the largest market with online poker and online gambling. So if we can get Pennsylvania into the same pool as Nevada, New Jersey, Delaware, you're instantly more than doubling the size of the online poker market in the U.S.
As we head out of here, Adam, I want you to tell everyone how much money you would have won last night on the NBA Finals if you had been able to get in and actually place your bets.
I speak solely in terms of jelly beans. There was no actual money wagered at this point. I can tell you that I would have been screaming "We the North," and I would have gotten the chips and dip that Drake wanted so badly.
Oh, man, I know. What a bummer. What a bummer. And again, this is just something we deal with here in Nevada, and it is something you want to ram your head through a wall, no doubt about it. Very, very tough to get online in game and get some stuff down. And by the time you do get in, the odds have changed, and they tell you that your bet is no good anyway. But you know what, Eric? Good on the Raptors. I feel good for them. I feel happy. We have a weekend here of some more sports. We have a major golf tournament going on. I mean, this podcast has been great. We flew through it. No Gowker. This is a good Friday.
You are talking too long. Tiger Woods is somewhere around the turn right now. I'd like to go get back to that broadcast. Let's wrap it up, buddy.
We got it. Again, guys, we are on Apple Podcasts. We're on Stitcher. We're on Spotify. We are on Google Podcasts as well. Please subscribe, rate, and review. It helps us climb those charts and exposes this podcast to more people who might actually be interested in this stuff that we talk about. You can find us on the Twitter machine at LSP Report, at Eric_Ramsey, at Adam Candy. That is 2 E's, no Y. And if you want some of my ramblings, at Matt Brown M2. For Adam, for Eric, I am Matt. Talk to you guys next week.